Hello and welcome to the Voiro podcast. With me as always is founder and CEO of Voiro, Kavita Shenoy. How are you?
How are you, Anand? Thank you. Today, we have something that we said we will talk about in the last couple of podcasts because it was brewing and it's finally come to an end for some. Hollywood is going through a lot of turmoil. There has been a lot of upheaval and people are trying to address the entry of technology and streaming media in the creative space and how people are appropriately compensated for it. The WGA strike, which started in March, on March 7th, finally concluded after 146 days and several breakdowns in conversation and negotiations to come to a agreement. During this time, SAG also joined them, who were the Screen Actors Guild, and also the Directors Guild joined them at the same time. But while the Writers Guild has arrived at an understanding and they have gone back to work, so has the Directors Guild. Our actors are still on strike. And today we are going to unravel what happened in the Writers Guild strike. Why is the Actors Guild currently at an impasse? And our thoughts on it. And if you're listening and you have any thoughts on it, don't hesitate to write in and tell us what you think. Because I think this applies to not just Hollywood, but to all different creative fields now, given that we have so much technology that is there and the ability for many types of people to work together in different environments. So over to you, Anand.
I think this was a fun topic to research, and we've been hinting at it for many episodes now, obviously following the news. But when I started getting into it, I realized that it's just so layered and so complicated, and it's what makes it hard. We've seen it in our own line of work. At Voiro, we support our customers in helping them the business suite for all their monetization teams. But we look at helping our customers manage monetization. But the implications of monetization is that money must change hands. Assets are worth a lot more than what they would be if they were used one time. And obviously, the world of digital, the world of streaming has taken all of this and turned it on its head. I remember a few years ago, Anil, Jimmy, you and I were debating YouTube's algorithm, Spotify's algorithm, and trying to say, okay, how do you apportion my 150 rupees Spotify subscription to all the artists whose music I listen to? And just that itself can get so complicated. We follow Peter Kafka, Lucas Shaw, Forbes, Variety. There's a lot of credit must go to these publications and podcasts because that's what we listen to. So like you said, there are four main sort of prime characters in all of this. There's the WGA, which is the Writers Guild of America. There is SAG-AFTRA, which is a combination of two unions, Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. There's the AMPTP, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, and of course the DGA, which is the Directors Guild of America. So four complicated, powerful, what we would typically call unions, right? And in many industries, we read and hear about the fact that, the union's on strike. Union's been on strike. I'm sure it's a common lyric in many songs.
Correct.
Right? It is. I'm not able to...
It is. But also, when you think about unions, you think about factory workers. You don't really think about organized, skilled labor that actually getting together to talk about things that are AI-driven.
Exactly.
And more ephemeral, like creative ideas.
Exactly. Absolutely. Right. You think of, okay, there's this labor union and they want more wages.
Yeah.
You think about
they
factory
want more
workers.
Time.
You think about teachers.
Yeah.
You think about large groups of people who need a union to fight for their rights. Otherwise, they would be individually disenfranchised.
You think of people who are underrepresented.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't think of Aaron Paul or Tom Cruise or Hassan Minhaj or people who you would think otherwise are extraordinarily powerful by themselves and are individually potent as characters. Like you don't. So that itself was interesting. And for the longest time, this was PR'd as a writer's strike. I didn't even know for a long time that there were three different groups of skill sets that were at
and you could
strike.
be part of like one of them and not the others, or both and not one. So if you're a writer and an actor, then what happens? Oh my God.
And interestingly, when the strike first started out, just a quick tidbit, the AMPTP internal news is that they were actually okay to take a 2-month strike because they were anyway looking to cut costs.
Gosh.
They didn't expect it to drag on for so long. So word on the street is that internally they were actually okay with the 2-month strike because these strikes happen often. I don't think they expected it to drag on for so long. Interestingly, the strike was largely about 3 things: more money, more transparency, and more safety. And the AI was, of course, the cool part of the strike, where it's also a very marketable narrative, right? These are writers who are on strike because they're afraid AI is going to come and take their jobs. And anyone who buys into the Luddite fallacy is going to obviously amplify this message. But it was much more than all of this. So like you pointed out, the writers started this, and then the directors followed, and then the actors followed that. And the studios said they would sort out the director's strike and then come back to the others, which they did. In fact, the director's strike was the easiest and quickest one of the lot with the DGA. It took 5 months. Started in, I think, June or maybe a little earlier than that.
March 7th.
March 7th. So it took 5 months. And interestingly, there was a similar strike in 1960, which is the last time both the WGA and this Actors Guild went on strike together. So it's been 60 years, 6 decades since both of them have been on strike. And the strike in 1960 also went on for about 145, 148 days. But that was the last time both of these associations were on strike.
What a lot of people fail to understand and also miss, and I missed up until people started to write about it, was that when you're on strike, you're not getting paid. So you're not making rent every month. You're not making your health insurance payments. You have to scrounge up from your savings to actually meet that. And this is a first world country, which means that things are very, very expensive. And you have to get by. So in the last strike of 1988, participants actually lost homes. And there were rumors of that's going to happen again this time. And that's what the studios were wanting to do, like squeeze people into saying that let's just get back to work.
And
it
appears that some of that has happened. Because of the nature of the strike and the fact that it was not just related to wages. In fact, some have described it as an existential crisis because of the AI component. The fact that it dragged on for so long in an industry where employment is not a regular thing. None of these guys get a regular salary anyway. I think if you classify the problem as a large existential crisis, the solution right now is not a permanent one. There will be future strikes. Also because many people don't know what the future holds when it comes to technology's implications on this industry. But the fact that it dragged on for so long, to your point, actually played a part in sort of achieving middle ground. There's a famous saying in negotiations which says, if you're fighting, grab half the loaf and leave, because at some point you will lose so much time that you will wish you'd just done that earlier.
Yeah.
But clearly, because of the implications on the day-to-day revenue of a majority of these players, at some point, I think they reached a solution. At least the writers and directors did. The actors still have not. Because of the fact that it started to hit their daily wages. And on the studio side, it started to hit. In fact, many of the studios had to recalibrate their guidance for next year. They started to lose revenue. Right? Or at some point, it became less of a staring contest and more of something that pinched both sides. So, after 148 days, the Writers Guild reached a solution, which of course I think is behind closed doors, but there have been enough leaks where there's some details that we have. And it was presumed that would be a prelude to a deal with actors, which would take 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe. And that story has taken a
big turn
and has in fact broken down to a point where there's no solution in sight. So it has not followed suit for a variety of reasons that we can get into. I thought I would just break down the details of what the Writers Guild agreed to before we use that as context for the others. So broadly, the agreement stipulates that studios or the AMPTP commits to a minimum volume of hiring on most shows. And what this basically does is it boosts employment. It creates a safety net, which loosely protects them against AI taking away their jobs. And as a result, it also ensures that the size of the union doesn't go down, which is a smaller unstated fact. Two, there is some level of transparency. The big problem with, and interestingly, this was the cable version of this played out in 1960, is a different version of this that played out in the 1988 strike. There is a lack of transparency because a lot of writers feel that they don't know how successful their shows are. They know that it's popular because of public rhetoric, but they have no clue what the numbers actually are in the world of streaming in terms of how popular their shows are getting from a residual standpoint. And the 1960 definition of residual was basically payment when your work gets a second life post its initial burst.
Yeah. This side of the world, we know it as royalties.
Actually, there is a difference between residual and royalties. I was looking into that because residuals are a collective agreement with the guild, whereas royalties are a direct agreement with the actor.
Right.
Or a
This is
writer.
another thing that I was surprised by. I thought that everybody had, you have guild terms, etc. when you sign a contract one-on-one with a
Yeah.
studio, but I didn't know that there was a fund, and that fund would pay you based on the work that you did
Yeah.
and the residuals that you would have from a particular show, and that it was the responsibility of you actually getting remunerated was with this guild. That's a lot of responsibility.
There's a lot of responsibility. There's so many actors. It's also, I think, to sort of give some credit to everybody involved, it's a hard concept to foresee. Think about it. Let's say I'm a writer. I have played a role in creating an asset. The ability to know that there will be a technology trend in the future that will give that asset a beautiful long tail is something that maybe nobody had in advance. So at some point you're like, I worked for so many hours, I took a wage and I left. But you don't realize that you're leaving the other party with an asset that they can use forever. And there is an element of understanding intellectual property in here, which I think is so fundamentally different from any other industry. It's not that I'm a contractor that's helping you make this building.
And then you live in it and I go away and make another one. Yeah.
Yeah, you're creating an asset that has
Life of its own.
life of its own that technology can then reshape
Yeah.
or renew at some point. The 1960 version of this applied to cable, but I think streaming is just a different animal.
Cable and 1981 was pay TV and video cassettes.
Yes, video cassettes, correct.
So there is a flavor of technology taking
Yeah.
over this whole concept of second life
Yeah,
and bringing it back. Like Suits is seeing, a revival right now. We saw it with Friends and whatever else with all our streaming platforms. So there is a sense of, hey, I worked on the show. It's like 25 years old, but I worked on the show and
Yeah.
it's doing so well, and my kids and their friends are watching it, and there has to be something
and
that I
just
get
think
from
about
it.
that, the longevity of that 25 years ago. Imagine if you're the content owner of the studio. Would you want to take on the responsibility of tracking down? Because on average, it takes, 1,500, 2,000 people who work on a show. You may not want it, which is why you work with the guild. But at some point, it starts to become complicated.
Yeah. How do you manage your own set of assets as well?
Yeah.
How do you manage your own filmography or whatever contracts that you have? So I guess this whole concept of the guild in itself
Yeah.
is very, very interesting and
Yeah.
and it's needed.
Yeah.
But I never thought it was about managing a large fund for other people. I thought it was each one to their own, and that the guild terms would apply to any contract that you may sign.
There's also smaller fine print. Obviously, the devil is in the details wherever you look across this issue. I remember there was a case study about Forrest Gump, which I think was a very landmark movie in this regard, where I think it was documented that the more senior and powerful actors would get a share of revenue, and the more junior ones would figure out a way to get a share of profit. And as a studio, you don't have any obligation to publicly document profitability at a movie level. You might do it at a studio level.
Yeah.
So what you consider a cost, nobody has access to, and which is the transparency problem here.
Which also, which goes a little deeper, because if you were a studio, would you really ascribe per movie profitability? Because I've hired Christopher Nolan to give me 3 movies. 1 out of the 3 may be a hit, but I've paid Christopher Nolan for 3 movies, but I've paid him once. So it depends on the fundamental, flexibility of how I accrue recognized revenue against various movies then starts to become very boxed for me, right? Because should I be saying that this movie was wildly profitable because, I spent it on Christopher Nolan and I gave this movie only 1/4 of his directorial fees? Or it depends, right? So then this is also forcing people to be far more mathematical. I'm sure they are
Perfect.
already.
No, exactly. You're absolutely right. Because we sit on, I think, a couple of fallacies. One is we assume that the powerful stars have it sorted. And Aaron Paul came out and said that he doesn't get any money today from Breaking Bad, which is obviously still very popular.
Yeah. And shocking. And you'd think that, hey man, this guy must be like laughing to the bank every time I switch on Netflix and watch Breaking Bad or whatever else.
And two, so at some point in the negotiations, the sort of heavyweights stepped in. Bob Iger, Ted Sarandos, and David Zaslav stepped into the room. Also as a show that they consider this to be an important enough issue. But I think it was Ted Sarandos who at some point said, you know what, the other fallacy is the fact that it's not like we are making wild profits as studios.
From library content.
We're not.
Exactly. So am I just bartering this down, saying that, okay, here, take this content, is lying here, and I feel like, these people want to buy all the 90s content from me for this amount of time, and Friends happens to be a part of that portfolio, and so it's gone. And it's gone to a different geography and it's being played, but it's not gone for a great amount of money because it's just gone for the fact that somebody else wanted some content to fill their
It's almost like everybody's winging it.
Yeah.
Trying to figure this out. Yeah. So the second sort of clause was linked to transparency, where the accusation was we don't have any idea how successful our shows are. And there was an earlier suggestion in August.
Neither do your producers.
There was an earlier suggestion in August.
Big secret there.
Which was the AMPTP said they would share with the guild quarterly non-shareable reports, which they rejected. Because the whole point is transparency, not to give me a non-shareable report that I can't show to the writers or to the actors. But I think they have arrived at a method to create more transparency and an associated bonus structure, which is tied to the performance of those shows, which is loosely tied either to revenue or to viewability.
So how much do you think this is going to actually help a writer?
Well,
we've seen some examples close up where, content creators have sued a content owner and saying that you've made a lot more money from the show and you haven't shared that money with me. We've run reports and found out that, well, actually the money that was made was shared. So with everything there is like something's got to give somewhere.
So I think at some point it became a blinking contest because they're like, let's see who can bear the pain. The studios were going to make losses and have to recalibrate and then lose their stock price. Or the writers whose at some point lifestyle and daily wages and homes are going to be affected. So to your point, how much did it help? Enough that they are better than when they started, but not enough to have a permanent solution to what they described as an existential crisis.
And I think it's also almost biblical, right? There's going to be a Pandora's box at the end of the day because you're opening up stuff that you have to now sit down to try and understand. They're going to dump a lot of data on these guys. Earlier, I was reading Parrot Analytics was supposed to come in to be able to guide them on the popularity of the show. But that has been chucked out and actual data is going to be shared with the guild. Now, somebody has to sit in that guild and make sure that they are able to understand that data, ascribe it, post it, make sure that they are...
More information causes more problems.
Yeah. More information definitely causes more problems.
I think they have gotten a little more safety, higher minimum salaries, and there is some math that will get them higher residue. It may not be earth-shattering money, but it's at least not zero. So they have definitely moved the needle in some sense. And I was listening to, interestingly, we read Lucas Shaw's newsletter and we follow Peter Kafka's podcast, and he had Lucas Shaw on to basically talk about it. And they spent a good half of the episode and said, do you realize we haven't used the word AI yet? So there is a safety net around AI, but it's very fuzzy. It's very fuzzy because AI, of course, is a moving target and it's very complicated. So there is are writers not allowed to use AI to improve their own job? No. Every single writer has admitted that they use ChatGPT very much to make their work better or faster. But given the fact that there is some protection against a minimum number of hiring, it's not that AI can now freely come in and take their jobs. But AI makes it very complicated because there's many facets to it. One is, can I as a studio use AI to write scripts and therefore not hire writers, which is one problem. Two is, if I used AI to create sort of a storyline or a loose skeleton and then used writers to build a script around it, can I call it an adaptation of an AI-generated plot? And apparently that one word can cause a lot of complications that has a huge bearing on how people get paid. But the third part is even fuzzier. If I wrote a script and gave it to you as a studio, and now you own the intellectual property on the script and you paid me for it and now you're giving me residuals. Can you, the studio, use my script to train a large language model for some use in the future that we have not yet foreseen? This is another problem. So there's 2-3 layers of what AI can and cannot do that I think is a lot fuzzier and has not been resolved entirely.
But at least they have kind of planted a flag and said that AI has to be discussed. So I'm assuming the next time they come around to discussing this entire agreement, AI would probably take the forefront.
Definitely.
Because everything else would have been
Definitely
sorted, hopefully.
So that's on the writers' strike. Before we get into the actors' strike and where that is, which is basically broken down, I was looking into the concept of residuals itself, and obviously another like rabbit hole. Where is your content going to be distributed? It's usually 4 distribution channels. It's physical, it's digital, it's theatrical, or it's in flight, which I forgot about entirely, that there is a revenue stream associated with in-flight distribution of content. I've always assumed that to just be free and on a smaller screen.
And you know what, I think, okay, fine. No, I really think that there's a lot of stuff that we just put in thinking there's so much money going behind it, but people are just saying this is barter this out and get this out to a in-flight catalog. But I must admit, in all our international legs, we look forward to watching good content that we may not have access to in India.
Yeah.
So maybe people are actually paying for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Do you think first class gets better content than economy?
I would be really upset. I already have better seats and better food and faster boarding. And
maybe they'll get more better content.
So
also this in the light of the fact that we all download our shows, put it on our iPads and go and watch it.
Yeah.
You know, without even putting on the screen in a flight.
Yes.
So
and then sometimes hide the iPad, then run out of battery and then curse ourselves. So who gets residual payments? It's usually principal performers. That's what it's always been dubbed as. Some actors, some writers, some artists, but not everybody, not extras. Like if you're an extra, you're not going to get access to residual.
Which is what they're also worried about that AI will do. They'll just like put up some extra people in the background.
Yeah, and just generate.
Just have them, generate those people.
Yeah. See, we have to realize that
man in restaurant.
Yeah, of course, and it's easy to do.
Yeah,
today,
and it could actually collapse the credit roll at the end of the movie.
Completely.
The number of extras.
Yeah, every time we see an Indian name up there, we're like, hey.
Yes, hey, it's an Indian guy.
But I think we have to appreciate the fact that this is an industry where work is inconsistent. Everyone in this industry is not getting a steady revenue stream every month from contracts or from work. And so passive income really matters. Really matters in this industry. Traditionally, the mathematics of residuals is complicated, but it's typically been either a share of gross income made beyond the initial burst of the content, or it's a fixed payout, which is math that nobody has seen, and it's not negotiable. It is a function of time, country, distribution channel, the original contract, revenue, viewership. It's a function of 5 or 6 different parameters that nobody is able to understand, but it is complex. And the problem with streaming is that studios are trying to tell people that popularity does not translate into revenue, which nobody wants to understand. Nobody is willing to understand that. There's also been room for a lot of hanky-panky.
Because it's so counterintuitive, right? If I'm popular, that means somebody is paying somebody to be able to watch that content.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what's the hanky-panky?
I don't know. So studios are saying that that's not necessarily true. You might get a lot of views, but that may not translate into revenue.
Yeah.
Because they have this math where who viewed it, is it an ad-supported tier, is it a subscription tier? So popularity need not mean revenue to the extent that we think it is. The hanky-panky is typically, the studios have also tried to cut corners in the past. There used to be a rule in earlier residuals where there was some sort of 90-day rule where the content had to be on the platform for 90 days for you to be eligible for a payout.
Oh.
And studios would apparently pull content out before 90 days.
89 days.
Yeah.
Boom.
You just pull it out. So it's a mess. But residuals, like we discussed, are not royalties.
Royalties, yeah.
And I didn't know that residuals are paid out to the guild as a quantum and then distributed. I didn't know that.
Fun, yeah. Well, I don't think we have anything to that effect in India. And if it was there, I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of contrary news to it. Like there'll be a lot of stuff that's going on with that money instead of paying actual actors.
I mean, I've thought about it in very simple terms. I've always said, oh, Ranveer Singh must be getting crores, extra must be getting nothing. And it's just...
But that's the way India is, right? There is no guild. We don't have a writers' union or anything. I think there is a union for young talent. There's an actors guild.
I don't know. We were once told that if you want to make it in Bombay, the first thing you have to do is get a union card.
Correct. But that's
work
something
on
for
any set.
extras and stuff like that, and working on set. But I don't know whether these. I don't know. We should find out.
Let's get an actor on the
we should.
podcast next time.
I think we should. I think we should get an actor and ask them how do they manage their residuals. Do you have that in India?
So now, to polish this off, this has at least been closed. They have signed, and in fact, late night funny TV is now back because there are no actors involved. It's mainly writers,
yeah,
and one host. So writers are allowed now to go back to work or to have meetings about future shoots which involve actors, even though the actors are not allowed to be involved.
But you know what has happened as an outcome of this? If you had a 1-year deal with the studio and you spend the last 5 months striking, the last 5 months has just gone off your contract. It's not increased by 5 months.
And it doesn't move.
It doesn't move. That's it. You got to renegotiate your contract or you're negotiated out of that contract at the end of the year. So you have next 6 months, 7 months to actually make your money for the year. That's it.
Do you know that the NBA has a players association that goes on strike every few years? And every decade or so, there's been a late start to the season because they couldn't agree to what's called the collective bargaining agreement. And it's then ended up being a shorter season. And NBA teams that win that season usually get popular. I mean, everyone says that's not a true championship.
Oh,
It
no.
was a shorter season.
So basically, it's an America thing.
I guess. Because the NBA Players Association has LeBron James and had
So
Kobe
they
Bryant.
also have a guild
They're
which
also
pays
superstars.
them out.
I don't know.
I think we got to find this
We
out.
got to get into that.
Yeah.
So the actors, the SAG-AFTRA AMPTP relationship, which is basically the actors strike, has a week ago just fallen through because the studios have walked off. And I as I was reading this, I realized that they were offered the same deal that the writers got, and they didn't want it because they said, "Where's our win?" They want their own win. There was some talk of
So actors are better than writers? Is that what
that's
it
what
is?
they want. The studios had proposed a performance-linked model, which you were breaking down for us before this. But the actors suggested originally a revenue share, which they rejected, and then suggested a per-subscriber payout, which has offended the studios. So there is a 480 million gap that you were talking about between what SAG wants and what the AMPTP is willing to give. They want 500 million, they're willing to give them 20 million.
This is not even, this gap is not even a gap. This is like two different worlds.
It's like sub 5%. So what the writers, actors have...
I think our procurement teams in all our companies would be like, this is how...
Getting a call from one right now.
Yeah, this is this is how we operate in India.
So what the actors have proposed is a 57 cent per subscriber payout per year from each of the platforms. And they are saying, it's less than a first class stamp or whatever. And then that money goes into a fund and that fund is then distributed to actors. And there are different methods in which that distribution can take place. But you broke this down for us earlier where you're saying it's either distributed then on a time and salary perspective or on a rateable distribution formula, which loosely translates into more screen time, bigger actor, regulars get more money compared to guest stars. But it's a way to distribute that money. But basically, they have not reached a deal and they have completely walked away from each other.
If you were a studio, would you take this deal? Saying that, hey, but on every subscriber, give me 55 cents. No. Why not?
For two reasons. One is, I do agree that popularity doesn't
and
translate
also
revenue.
My subscriber is coming to me every month and it's so complicated right now in terms of subscription analytics.
I think the earlier method was performance linked and linked to the performance of the content and then had tranches for fixed payouts. I think that's fine. But I think as a studio, I'd be afraid that if I agreed to this, the writers will open up their deal again.
Yes, the precedence of having this and how many people do we pay? So I was thinking about this and the only way, there seems to be a way ahead for anybody is to pass on the burden to the consumer. So every time I sign up, have a percentage of that has like SAG tax, right? And it goes to the SAG guild.
Yeah.
And I get like a percentage and then the government can tax their deduction at source and and so on and so forth. And everybody makes their money, and the consumer just pays.
I keep thinking about the fact that in all this, streaming has been proven to be an unsustainable, loss-making model. It's like when we scream at airlines about them charging us for peanuts. I think we don't forget the fact that airlines are losing money.
But we were also talking about the fact that you're in the air.
Yes. Yeah.
You're a human being
You're
who's
flying.
in the air. You're flying.
You're watching all of this great, beautifully produced content
On your freaking phone.
in the air.
In the air, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
It
I
has
think
broken up. And they have not even addressed the AI piece, which I'm sure is far more complicated than the writer's gripe with AI, because I can copy you, make a likeness of you, and I don't need you to act anymore.
maybe the guilds just have to like list themselves on some kind of a stock exchange and just start making money off of the fact that they're just a group of great people who are going to make money. I don't know. But I think, at the end of the day, all of these unions that have come together to fight the cause, fight this cause for the people who are part of the guild, I'm fascinated by the fact that this is not each one to their own, and that there are some rules of engagement that you need to be a part of. It's actually a guild, a fund that's going to look out for you for the rest of your career and actually stand by you, which is, I think, commendable. I don't know of anything that's happening like that in India, and I think we need to find that out. But I think that's extremely commendable. But it's also a concentration of money and power in the guild in itself, which could be alienating if you don't want to be a part of the guild. I know that there are some groups that are not part of the guild who continue to operate and produce and direct and so on and so forth. With 55 cents per subscriber, I think I understand where the producers, the alliance actually is coming from. The alliance of motion picture and television producers is coming from. It's impossible to keep track of the number of ways you're going to drive subscriptions. You can pay a transaction a cost, you can pay by month, you can pay with a package, you can pay annually. So many ways to monetize. And how are you going to make sure that you're going to dial it back to one single subscriber? So in a place where it's a telecom package and I'm getting Netflix free because I'm a subscriber to a telecom company, how are you going to ascribe that subscriber that kind of the attribution of that revenue and then get 55 cents on that subscriber? So I think that's the complicated aspect of that is what's also stopping everybody from saying, hey, this is really not tenable. The other thing is, like, we are in 2023. We should be able to do this kind of math and this kind of, attribution.
I remember our favorite episode from last season, which was all about trust.
Yeah.
I think that therein lies the problem.
Yeah. But it's also ease of business. They're saying I can give you 20 million. I can enrich your guild with 20 million, give you whatever information you need to be able to distribute that 20 million appropriately. But if you're saying on every subscriber you want 55 cents, we will have to build an entire industry to be able to track that, which is also good. That's also good, right? But then that's not going to move this conversation forward. People are not going to go back to work faster. Anyway, so that's with all of the fracas that's happening in Hollywood right now with their unions and the fact that they have massive funds that take care of their actors and directors and writers. And moving the focus back a little bit to India right now, the biggest thing that's on everybody's mind and in our hearts is cricket.
The carnival of cricket.
Yes. Did you watch the India-Pakistan match?
I sure did. Actually, I missed most of the second half because I took a break, and by the time I came back, it was over.
So, yeah.
So I missed it. I watched the first half.
Yes, and there was some terrible advertising as well around it. With I think Make My Trip took out a full page ad in the papers.
And we, of course, love to cancel
yes,
brands and people, so they have been
of course,
cancelled.
They have been cancelled, and then Clear Drip has come in to be able to say that this is not the way we behave, and so on and so forth. But cricket this time is on Hotstar, and they created some records with the India-Pakistan match. They had
30 million.
Yeah, 35, I thought. Let me read it up. So, Jio Cinema had 32 million viewers, and Hotstar has reclaimed that by drawing 35 million concurrent viewers. This happens only in India, and this can happen only in India, and this can happen only with cricket. And this was because in retaliation to what Viacom 18 did with IPL, opening it up for free, Hotstar said also, okay, fine. So we're going to free up transmission to mobile phones, right? So that people could access it for free on their mobile phones. And so that's definitely worked in terms of viewership. How much that has translated into actual revenue from an advertising perspective still has to be seen. Clearly,
there is no correlation.
There is no correlation, as we have just established. But cricket is back. It's also been approved by the IOC to be part of the Olympics.
The Olympics in the US.
Yeah, after 126 years.
Yeah. And I think that's the US is launching a cricket league. I know Satya Nadella has bought a team, and all the Indian CEOs are like going to battle it out in the US. But this is definitely going to be a boost for the popularity of that league.
Yeah.
In the US.
And Virendra Sehwag is up there in the top 10 in Instagram followers.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Like right after one of the Jenners.
Really?
Yeah. I went down that rabbit hole yesterday trying to find out where Taylor Swift fits. Who's
it's a cool game to play. Guess how many follow. I'm miserable at it, as you once saw. I'm really bad.
But Cristiano Ronaldo has like 678 million or some ridiculously obscene number like
I have 400.
You don't? I have a measly 200.
200?
On Instagram. But I'm a private account. I mean, who's going to follow me?
I will make 10 burner accounts and follow you. As your friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyway, so I think cricket is definitely having a comeback. I know that we keep saying that it's way too much cricket and there should be other sports. But I feel like if we have a forerunner, possibly we could have other things like kind of strung along with it to be able to make popular, like kabaddi and all our Asian games and everything else that are currently being telecast. There has to be a lot more done in this sports arena, and with the attention that cricket is getting as well, it is heartening to see that at least we have some sport. I mean, I know that's like scraping the bottom of the barrel, but at least there is that, and people are choosing them as their careers, and there are peripheral careers to be had around sports as well, which are well-paying and forward-looking. So anyway, so that was what we put together for today, both a little bit of a deep dive in what's happening in the US with all the strikes between SAG.
Hang on cricket.
AMPTP.
Are you actively going to participate in the rest of the World Cup? Are you lined up to watch? Are you going to go for any of the games?
No, I'm not. Are you?
The whole stadium experience just sounds tiring to me.
Yeah, you said that last time as well.
Yeah. At home, there's a TV, there's popcorn, there's commentary, there's...
At home, I have other options. I mean, I much as I love cricket, I mean, I grew up with a very anxious father who would switch off the game when it became really stressful. So, I don't associate cricket with joy and happiness. I just associate.
But there's a social angle to it.
It is, yes.
You can have friends over.
But remember when we used to stay in Malleshwaram, everybody used to have the match on. We used to hear everybody shouting at the same time. But my house, when people used to shout that something was going on, my dad would go out to the TV and switch it off. And then my brother would fight with him and switch it back on again, right? So,
I would have fights with my dad because he would predict that we're going to lose the game. Like, this is it. We're not going to recover from this. And I was like, how can you be so pessimistic?
Put good energy out there. Yeah. I think watching games and watching sports together has to come back. And COVID kind of ruined it for everybody else. We spoke to somebody from DAZN the other day, and he was saying that it was his responsibility to be able to strike deals with various other commercial areas in which sports could be aired, and one of them were prisons. Yeah, and that people actually congregate around a television set or a screen and actually watch a game. It's not just bars and hotel rooms and things like that, but anywhere else. But have you ever seen a match streamed live on a flight?
No, I have not.
Maybe that's the next frontier.
Yeah. No, but I heard it's a thing now.
It's a thing now?
Yeah. The World Cup, Football World Cup was
streamed.
Popular photos of people celebrating on
the flight.
On the flight.
Oh, nice. Okay. So anyway,
I think there's a lag, but once you're in midair, what do you care? You won't even know.
Yeah, exactly. How would you know what's happening?
Yeah.
But with internet on board and things like that, I'm sure that there is capability of that happening. But like we just mentioned, popularity does not equal to money. So on that note, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I know that we had fun putting this together and we discovered a lot of things about what's happening in the US, and I'm really curious to know now, is this happening in India as well? Do we have a guild? Do we have people looking out for our actors,
We
our
need a guild
writers?
here. What if this episode becomes popular like 50 years from now?
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm curious to know, is it just only about paying off people and bribes, or is it actually something to do with longevity of your career? Because when I was in advertising, you would sign the photography guild terms. That would only be terms of payment to the photographer, him or herself, right? You would have to pay a particular kind of advance, and then once it was published, you had to pay the remainder, and that was it. But I'm curious. This is the next mission.
It is.
Does a guild exist in India?
For the record, I will take 20 million.
You will take 20
I have
million?
no problem.
Would you just walk away 20
I
million?
don't need the 480. I'll find it 20.
That's what, okay, so that's how much you can buy Anand for. That's his price. All right then. So thank you, everybody. This has been a great episode. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Leena. We missed you today, Santosh. Thanks, Anand.
Bye.
Bye.